again? Well, today I've been asked by questions. Andrew Parkinson, 8837, has said the 5th of December, today, was the Dynamite Kid's birthday and also the same day that he died, 60 years later. So he's asking me here, what did I think of the Dynamite Kid? Then we've got Timothy Cross, F4. Can you say whether you used performance-enhancing drugs or recreational drugs in your career, or did any British professional wrestlers use them? Well, I can't speak for the rest of them, but I'll be able to speak for me. Basically, those are the two questions that I'm going to deal with today. I'm going to start with the Dynamite, really. Yes, his name was Tom Billington, of course you will all know that. He had a very dynamic, because he was called Dynamite Kid, wasn't he? A very dynamic style and career, and he made a big impact, what he was doing. You can't ever take that away from him. Some of the time he lost his way and did some very foolish things that ended up in a bad way for him, really. But let's just backtrack a little bit and talk about how he came into the business. Because, of course, I can not shed a bit of light on the guy who trained him, really, who I perceived to have trained him, a chap called Ted Betley. Well, going back to yesterday's talk about Cyril Morris and what happened there, well, I told you yesterday that Cyril and I ended up being the finalists in this knockout competition of mass men. I've given it a bit of thought in the meantime, and I've come up, I know what happened now. Cyril wrestled another mass wrestler, and I wrestled Dr. Death. So it was a six-way team, 2 eliminators and a final. I was in the final with the professor. But my eliminator was with Dr. Death, who turned out to be Ted Betley, who was the Dynamite's trainer. He wasn't training the Dynamite then, that comes later, of course, because we're not talking, Dynamite doesn't come along till much later. So Ted's Dr. Death, and I'm going to do this bout with him, aren't I? So we're in the dressing room. I may have told you this story before, but I'll tell you it again. And obviously the orders come down from Jack Atherton. We call them the orders, that we're going to do a knockout match. My knockout match is between myself, Kendo Nagasaki, and Dr. Death, who's Ted Betley, of course. Get in the dressing room, Jack tells us what he wants, and I'm going to be the winner because I'm going to go forward to our friend Cyril Morris, aren't I? We're in the dressing room, and Ted Betley says to me, he said, by this time, of course, I've got a bit of a reputation of dumping people and doing some things. I think it's after the Polish Eagle runs out of the ring, screaming, I've tried to kill him. He's got a big lump on his head, and Leon Harris declared me the winner and buggering off as well. You've heard that tale, haven't you? He's heard about all this, hasn't he? So he decides to tell me in the dressing room, he says, if you're trying any of that funny stuff on me, I'll look in. I looked at him, I thought, he's a little squirt of a guy, isn't he? Yeah. There's nothing about him. I said to him, yeah, I'd like to see that when your feet are 2 feet off the floor. We'll test that one out, won't we? So that's how we went into the ring. I'm going to win because that's what Jack wants. But he's saying, if I try to do my usual show, he's going to block me. That never happened. I did what I normally do. I mean, I didn't chuck him out of the ring inappropriate or anything like that, like I did later on. But I did my usual show. There was no hooking in. His legs were too short for that anyway. So going forward, we come to later on, much later on, when the Dynamite's coming into the job. He's not in the job yet. And Ted brings him round a show that I was on. I remember it now. He brought him round, this young lad. I suppose the Dynamite would have been probably not even 16 by then, perhaps 15. He's going to bring him in a job, but he's in the dressing room with him. He never came over to me, never spoke to me, never introduced the Dynamite to me. There was obviously still animosity there. And Betley and I never spoke again from that day, never spoke again. And there's always this, I think I only saw him a couple of times after that when he was dragging this lad round, but he never spoke to me. So there's obviously a bit of bitterness there right from there. Going on in time, I've read that the Dynamite went to Wigan training, and I will dispute that. I don't think the Dynamite ever did go to Wigan training. And also it says that he trained with Billy Robinson in Wigan. That can't be true, because the Dynamite's not old enough to have done that. And by the time the Dynamites could have gone to Wigan, let's say, as a 15, 16-year-old or whether he supposedly went to Wigan, Billy Robinson is already in Japan, working full-time. He doesn't come back to Wigan to do a bit of training with the Dynamite. So that's nonsense. So if you catch it out in a bit of a fib anywhere, the whole thing falls apart, doesn't it? Because knowing Ted Betley like I know Ted Betley, and Billy Riley had no respect for Ted Betley, let me tell you. He thought he was I won't say that word, but that's what he thought he was. Ted Betley would never send the Dynamite to Wigan, because if the Dynamite went to Wigan and realised what wrestling was all about, he'd never go back to Ted, would he? He'd stay in Wigan. He would have lost a pupil. I cannot for the life of me see him popping over to Wigan, training with Billy Riley in the Wigan gym and going back to Ted Betley. Can't see it. Cannot see it. So I think that's a load of nonsense. Going forward in time, the Dynamite does get into the professional job. As a 16-year-old, he gets on the television and he makes quite an impression because he's a young, good-looking lad and he's very active, very agile. He's the right size to be agile. If you look at the human frame, big lads, people 6 foot plus, can't do backflips like these 5'6", 5'8" guys can. The geometry is not right. The best gymnasts are small guys. They're not. Not Andre the Giant. He doesn't do gymnasts, does he? He lumbers around as a big man. And big people, it's not right. They don't have the right geometry. The limbs are too long, and it's too much of a. The smaller the circle, the more active you can be. So the centre of gravity is totally different on a little guy than it is on a big guy. So you're going to get far more activity out of this little guy, which, Mark Rollerball Rocco falls into the same category. 5'8", 5'9". He's all full of energy, and he can do all this thing. Get somebody like Albert Wall at 6'2", Gwyn Davis that's 6'4". They can't do it. They've got a cat in hell's chance of doing a backflip or doing all these. But they're impressive men. I mean, George Gordienko was about 6 foot, but he's 19 and a half, 20 stone. Ain't going to be jumping around like a 2-year-old, is he? It's just not the style. He's not built for it, but he's a damn good wrestler. And my contention is this, that a good big un will always beat a good small one. So I think if these people who have done all this, all this aerobatics, acrobatic, they got in the ring, A-Man Zay, which I call A-Man Zay, and they were in the ring with these Billy Robinsons, Carl Gotches, George Gordienko, our friend in Texas, the one that's allegedly as old as me, Dory Funk Jr. They're big lads. But these smaller lads, they're not going to do too well with them if it comes what the Americans call a shoot, don't they? Very Wild West, isn't it? But we used to call it, straight pull or straight fight. They're not going to do so well because I will repeat it: a big guy will always beat a small one. They've got all the advantage, they've got the strength. Now, me personally, I had a lot going for me because I came through the judo ranks, as you probably know. I won the BJC championships in '61. But early on in my judo career, I hurt my shoulder. And I thought I was going to go and straighten up, go to a gym. I may have told you this story before, but I'll tell you again. Got to go to a gym to strengthen up my shoulder, do some weight training, aren't I? Do some weight training. I get there and I'm doing a bit of weight training, what you would call weight training, which is curl, press, bench press, all those, what we used to call strength set things. Builds up the muscles, this, that and the other. But there was a team of lads there doing Olympic lifting, which was the 3 lifts, which was press, snatch, clean and jerk in my day. And in order to do, they asked me to join with them, and I didn't want to at first. I said, I may, because I want to do judo, strengthen me up. He said, well, give it a go. So I gave it a go, and I turned out to be very good at it. Turned out to be, really for my size, exceptionally strong. I wasn't a 20, 25 stone guy. When I was doing weightlifting, or the Olympic lifting, I was about 16 and a half stone, but that's extremely strong. I could actually get 380 pounds above my head without steroids. And as you look into the dynamics of doing this type of weightlifting, Olympic lifting, it's all about explosive energy. When you're doing curls, it's slow and ponderous. When you're doing all these other things, you're doing the bench press, it's slow, push. When you're doing Olympic lifting, you pose at the bar, it's all mental, isn't it? And suddenly you go, and it's got to go, like that. That turns out to be the ideal method of training for wrestling or judo, because it's an explosive thing. You get yourself in the right position, and you have to know when that position's right, and it's boom, it's all too late. It doesn't happen like that. Come on there. It doesn't happen like that. It happens like, ugh. And that type of weightlifting, that type of training with weights, turns out to be better for wrestling, straight wrestling, or any sort of wrestling really for that matter, because it's explosive, isn't it? It's not ponderous. Now, going forward to the Dynamite and people like that, yes, the Dynamite did some very quick moves because he's a little guy, isn't he? That's good. But the people he's in the ring with are all bodybuilders. They're all slow. Although they can get up on these ropes and dive off, they're not quick in that way. They've all done lots of, we used to call it muscle bound, would you believe? And that's what it is. The muscles do not react in that way. The signal that comes to the brain, to the muscle, doesn't give that, it gives, but they look marvellous, don't they? Let's face it. They're all superheroes, aren't they? They've got great bodies, they look $1 million. And that's how the American wrestling really turned into. They weren't wrestlers anymore. They were bodybuilders that were doing show wrestling. It's a show. And when you're doing a show, you can do all these things that these people do, like the Dynamite and all these others, because the other guy's not trying to stop you, is he? He's not trying to stop you. He's letting you do it. But there's a big difference between letting somebody do it and trying to. If you get in there with somebody who's trying to stop you, then that's a whole different ball game. That's an whole different ball game, and you have to know. You don't have to know it because these people don't, and they don't need it. Why would they? They don't want to be fighting. I remember John Lees, who was Mr. Universe. Great body John had. Came from Stalybridge, I think, in Manchester, somewhere like that. Great body. He looked $1 million, but he'd hate anybody getting hold of that body. Don't touch me. Don't touch me. You've heard about come and collect me, Mike. This is don't touch me, John. Because he trained and he looked brilliant. He didn't want anybody knocking that body about. So if you ever went on with him, you got a lecture about, don't do this and don't do that and don't do the other. But he looked $1 million because you could get a show out of him. A show, but you didn't pick him up and slam him on his back because you didn't want that. If you did that, you'd never get in the ring with him again. He'd put a line through your neck. And they did, these people who were bodybuilding, they spent their lives building up these bodies, didn't they? Didn't want them knocked about. I mean, the wrestlers are not quite the same because they were in the business for doing these, all these shows, bumps that they took. They took a lot of bumps as well. But the ones I knew in my time, like John, he didn't like taking bumps. He was a Mr. Universe and did the posing, wasn't he? So that, going back to the Dynamite was, what he did was really, really good. I mean, he's very, very good at what he did. And he made a big impact on the business in that way. But so did Mark Rollerball Rocco. He was an innovator in that way. He was full of energy and doing all these same things that the Dynamite was doing. The both of them were really sort of good for the job. And I never worked with the Dynamite. I worked with Rollerball. And Rollerball was good for me because he got stuck in, didn't he? Or at least, professionally he got stuck in. He didn't really get stuck in. He never tried to do anything that I would be annoyed about. It was part of the show, wasn't it? I believe that the Dynamite did take a few liberties with people, but then so did I. And I believe that the Dynamite also became very aggressive in the dressing room and doing silly things, pranks and things like that. But I don't know for sure, but I would think he chose his mark rather carefully. I don't think he'd be completely stupid. If he ever got in the same dressing room as Billy Robinson, I don't think he'd be smacking him around the head or even setting fire to his bag. I don't think that would work out too well. And other lads like, as I said, Gordienko and Karl Gotch, can you imagine him doing something to Karl Gotch? How would that end up? How would that end up? I know the only time that we got a record that ended up badly for him was the Rougeau brothers. And, those two, they were a bit sort of almost like psychopaths. They waited, didn't they, and planned it in this sort of way. They were looking for revenge. The Dynamite walked into that green. These two lads were, they planned it. That's not reactionary. Let's think about this. Let's make sure we get this right. I think Dynamite was somebody in the circumstances where he's made these mistakes was a bit reactionary. And that's unwise, really. I mean, I've been with people, as I told you the other day, in the car job. You can't afford to be reactionary with those people, because they'll come and visit you. So that's really I don't know him that well. I'm only talking from what I know about Ted, what I know about Wigan. That's just, not Wigan the town, but Riley's gym. I don't think he ever went there. I think that's just a nice tale. Some people say that Billy Robinson said he went there. I've never seen that. Where's Billy Robinson said? And he'd never met Billy there, for sure. Couldn't possibly have done. And all the top lads that were there when I was there, at the time the Dynamite comes into the job, they're all out of it. Bob Robinson, all them. Bob never went near the gym after about 1965, 66. Didn't. So he'd never met these people. So it's nonsense, really. So that's really my opinion. And it is my opinion. Other people might have different opinions, of course. But I'm open to cross-examination if you want. I think my memory's pretty good. And my assessment is even better. So I'll leave it there. Right, that's dealt with the first question about the Dynamite, etc., etc. Now we come to Timothy, who wants to know about drug taking. I suppose he's talking about me, is he? And drug taking in general in the British wrestling scene. Now, my background in weightlifting, really, I first became aware of anabolic steroids, we used to call it in that day, way back in 1960, probably, when I was the Society of Amateur Weightlifters Heavyweight Champion. Let me just put you right who that is. There were two societies in the country, the British Weightlifting Association and the Amateur Weightlifting Association. I was in the latter one. Now, the latter one mainly operated in the north, And the lads started it up really because there wasn't enough competitions going on in the north. They were all down south. Now, the guy that was the heavyweight champion in the other one was the Green Cross Grow man. What was his name? Darth Vader. Dave Prowse. Now, he was their heavyweight champion at the time, and I became the heavyweight champion of the what you might call the alternative organisation. Our totals weren't far apart. My total used to hover between 880 to 900. That's for the 3 lifts. Of course, you had it all together. I never managed my best lift in each of the lifts on the same day. I sometimes could do more in the gym. I did more on all the lifts in the gym than I could manage in competition. I never got them all together for some reason. So I ended up being about 20 pounds lower in competition than I would have done if I'd done my best lift. I never quite cracked it for some reason. On the day, I never quite got the very best lift that I did in the 3 lifts on the same day. But when I was doing it, the heavyweight champion of the world was a guy called Paul Anderson. And he had a total. You've got to remember, these totals are right on the borderline, aren't they? You know, when you've got a total, if you can put 5 or 6 pounds on your total, it's a lot. Because you're right on the border, you know, you're right on the limit, aren't you? And this guy, in, I think it was about a year to 18 months, put around 200 pounds on his total. And everybody's saying, how's he done that? You know, he was the world heavyweight champion. I think his total was 1,200 pounds or something like that, way beyond what we were doing. He's American. He was a big lad as well, Paul Anderson was. And suddenly this total goes up by another, I think it was £100 or perhaps even more. What's going on? And then we got fed back on the grapevine, you know, the chatterbox, that he was taking something that was called anabolic steroids. And we all said, well, where do you get that from? What is it? And it turned out to be steroids, didn't it? Which later on became very prevalent in the wrestling business. And of course, we know the body, Arnold Schwarzenegger and people like that. Goodness me, how much did he take? You know, enough to kill a cow, I would have thought. But we never got it. We couldn't. I probably would have taken it if I could have got it. At that time, we couldn't got it. By the time I could have got it, and I was seeing what, you know, was happening to people, I decided against that sort of thing. So I never did it. There were people in our job that did, right away, you know, the Dynamite, his cousin. A lot of them that went to America, they had to do it because everybody was doing it out there. All these Hulk Hogan, all those people, all steroid freaks. That's what they were. And that came through the bodybuilding thing. I mean, if you look at bodybuilding, let's take bodybuilding for example. The last sort of natural bodybuilder was played Tarzan in the movies, and he had what you might call a natural body. And then along came a guy called Dave Draper, and he looked totally different. He was the next one. He was the next Mr. Universe. Dave Draper. He looked totally different. He got about 40 or 50% more body mass than the other Mr. Universe that was the Tarzan guy. So what had he done? But that was the beginning, really, of steroids in bodybuilding. So steroids, yes, they were about. I was aware of them, but I never took them. But I do, there were people in our job that did take them. But they weren't used very much up until the sort of early 70s. Then it became more, so when I started now. So some used them, some didn't. I never did. And that's really all I've got to say on the subject. So I'll say cheerio for now.